Good afternoon. It's Friday the 7th of June 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we've got Ben Rubin and Debi Evans. Welcome to the programme, both. We're going to get started off with something that most people probably will not find surprising, and that is the latest press release from the World Health Organization on avian flu. This is following the death of a man in Mexico, apparently with avian flu A, which is H5N2. And this is the first time that anyone has been infected with this particular so-called variant. So let's have a look at what they're saying here. On the 23rd of May, 2024, the Mexico International Health Regulations National Focal Point reported to the WHO a confirmed fatal case of human infection with avian influenza A (H5N2) virus detected in a resident of the state of Mexico who was hospitalized in Mexico City. This is the first laboratory confirmed human case of infection with an influenza A virus, that's H5N2, reported globally, and the first avian H5 virus infection in a person reported in Mexico. So on May the 23rd, the Mexico IHR NFP reported a confirmed case. They went on to say that the person who was hospitalized in Mexico had no history of exposure to poultry or other animals. The case had multiple underlying medical conditions. So here we go. What did he actually die of? Because he had multiple underlying medical conditions. The case had already been bedridden for 3 weeks for other reasons prior to the onset of acute symptoms. So where did this come from, and what actually was it? So we put that back on screen. The next one says that results from real-time polymerase chain reaction test of a respiratory sample collected and tested at INER on the 24th of April indicated a non-subtypable influenza A virus. On the 8th of May, the sample was sent for sequencing to the Laboratory of Molecular Biology of Emerging Diseases Center for Research in Infectious Diseases, which indicated that the sample was positive for influenza A. So they did a PCR test and then they sent it for sequencing. But then they did another PCR test on the 20th of May. The sample received at the Institute of Epidemiological Diagnosis and Reference of the Mexico National Influenza Center for analysis by RT-PCR, obtaining a positive result for influenza A. And then on the 22nd of May, sequencing of the sample confirmed the influenza subtype was A H5N2. So the sample had a PCR test done on it, then it had genetic sequencing done on it, then it had another PCR test on it, and then it had further genetic sequencing done on it. And you've got to ask the question, could they not get the answer the first time round that they were wanting? So they kept testing until perhaps they did. So the first question in my mind is, what is this all about? Are they really going to attempt to push through the idea of lockdowns, PCR testing, vaccination? Could be that. But I suspect that the reason is more likely to be this. So we know that one of the Millennium Development Goals and one of the goals of net zero policy is to reduce red meat intake. In fact, all meat intake and meat and dairy, chickens, these types of things have been under attack, this type of farming, for quite a long time. We cannot forget the foot and mouth outbreak in the UK, where the slaughtered on suspicion policy was brought in based on the modelling of Neil Ferguson at Imperial College. We have seen many cases around the UK in the last few months and a couple of years, in fact, of poultry flocks being slaughtered en masse, again on suspicion, because maybe one case of bird flu was found in the flock, so the entire flock had to go. We've got to keep in mind as well that there is a policy here. The EU calls it farm to fork. It's also called farm to fork in the UK as well. This is the EU's document, Farm to Fork for a Fair, Healthy and Environmentally Friendly Food System. And of course, this is part of an aim to build a global governance policy and network for farm to fork strategy. It will bring in digital security certificates. So food as is produced from the farm to the plate will have to be tracked all the way through the process. The standards and rules are increasingly intended to exclude meat and dairy. So there are quite a number of potential benefits of this entire narrative for the World Health Organization, the United Nations in general. But Debi, I'd just be interested in your thoughts on it because, we have a very clear agenda to remove or reduce significantly the use of meat for food across the world, and they are pushing this policy very hard, and this helps.
Good afternoon, and apologise to anybody that thinks that I'm sitting in a cave. I'm afraid my computer at the very last minute decided to change all the settings, and so it looks as though I'm in the... But yes, Mike, avian flu, there's many strands to this actually, not just fear. The PCR tests, I mean, they're looking for things, they're desperate to find things. Let's not forget Bill Gates' germ team. But there's much more to follow on this, and I've got more to say. Perhaps we can talk about it on Extra.
Yes, okay. Well, in the meantime, Debi, there has been a report in the UK of an outbreak of E. coli right across the country. I think 100 cases or so far. And so far, they seem to be saying that this is probably linked to some kind of supermarket product. But you've been talking about E. coli and the raising of the profile of E. coli with respect to health in humans in the UK for quite some time.
Yes, I have indeed, Mike. And this is what I think is part of a very big agenda. And I'd like people to take note because yesterday was D-Day. It was the 6th of June, 2024. And last night I put out a little tweet, but it seemed to gain quite a lot of attention. As much as I hate watching myself, let's look at the tweet that I put out last night. Today is the 6th of June 2024, D-Day. Today, the UK HSA have put out an urgent alert with regards to E. coli contamination. This apparently has been spread through an unnamed food source and has hospitalised many people. On the 6th of June 2023, I wrote in my blog, which can be found on the UK Column website, the World Health Organization appears to map each country to the pathogen most likely to cause a problem. Is this a forecast of what is to come? Are we to expect multiple epidemics in different countries? Perhaps a simultaneous polycrisis, a health polycrisis? It could be that some parts of Western Europe, including the UK, could be about to see a rise in E. coli and Cryptosporidium, which also involves contaminated water and poorly tummies. I don't believe in coincidences. This was written exactly a year ago today, when an E. coli outbreak has been announced. For many months I have been warning of something called antimicrobial resistance, where they will say that antibiotics no longer work and that because of a superbug, we're all going to need super antibiotics or mRNA vaccines against antimicrobial resistance. Please keep tuned to UK Column. Watch tomorrow at 1 o'clock, where I will be revealing much, much more. But please. And what I said right at the end was, please remember that you heard it here first at UK Column, because what I want to just show you, and I'm going to use just a little snapshot. So ITV News, this was one of the mainstream media stories that covered this yesterday. UK-wide E. coli outbreak. What do we know so far? Dated the 6th of June, exactly 1 year to the day that I wrote my blog. So for a change, I'm going to look in at Thames Water. As you know, I have a good relationship with the water companies, and I just want you to see that they have their own enhancement case for long-term water quality strategy on Cryptosporidium. And focusing straight in on Thames, carrying on, you'll see that the Mail was running a story recently urging an urgent do not drink water to hundreds of homes in Surrey after a fuel leak. And this was all after the Brixham incident of Cryptosporidium in Devon. They also covered another story in the Mail, I believe it was, where they were warning of very similar. They were warning, sorry, this is the standard, May 2024, they're carrying out tests for vomiting and sickness. They never said actually what for. Are you getting the feeling perhaps that water companies are getting super bad press with all the news that we've heard about sewage, etc.? Just saying, so take note of that for a few minutes. Now, I just want you to point you to my blog. Now, my blog was dated the 6th of June, 2023. Please go back and have a look at it, because I actually did write a very chunky piece about E. coli. This is what I said in the video. So if you want to go and see, I don't have a crystal ball. I just do 16 hours of research every single day. So if you want to go and see the document that the World Health Organization are mapping Cryptosporidium and E. coli, then all the links are in my blog. If you go to the next slide, I'm just taking a few little snippets from the blog, but you'll see that I was linking it directly to antimicrobial resistance. And you can see an article there, antimicrobial resistance could kill us before climate change. And the final little snippet that I've taken from my blog is E. coli. This was my opinion. E. coli plus antimicrobial resistance and enteroviruses are both being made big issues deliberately, in my opinion, not just globally, but specifically in the West. The UK appears to be leading the way. So once again, we bring you the news first at UK Column, and there is that big article in my blog, but keep tuned because there's more to come on this, much more. And if you want to know if there's an E. coli vaccine, of course there is.
Yes, okay, thank you, Debbie. And we'll have more on antimicrobial resistance a little bit later. But Ben, last week we were talking about the B team, but there's been a bit of movement on this.
There has absolutely been some movement on this. There's been a big development this week as it relates to the B team, and also the issue of female leaders and the big drive globally to put women into positions of power, and importantly, to keep them in positions of power, which seems to be a bit of a challenge, as we'll come on to. So it starts here with the B team, who I spoke about last week. So this is an international group focused on delivering a global agenda, top-level business and political leaders getting together to talk about the future of humanity. And we're going to focus in on the lady you can see in the center there with the microphone, who is this woman, Halla Thomasdottir. And she's the chief executive of the B team. But this week, she's just been voted in as the president of Iceland. Right? So this is a very top-level group. We said last week the B team is a top-level group. You've got Richard Branson there. You've got top-level political people there. She has just been made the head of state for Iceland. What do we know about her? So let's have a little look at her profile on the Council for Inclusive Capitalism page. So she's a member of Linda Rothschild's Council for Inclusive Capitalism. This tells her that she started off her career in the corporate world at Mars and Pepsi Cola before getting into politics. She has been given a lot of coverage, not least by the B team, who are very excited, as you'd expect, saying that Iceland have gained an exceptional leader today who's going to advance the courageous leadership that she championed at the B team and which the world so urgently needs. She was also given a little nod from the Goals House, the people who are championing the Sustainable Development Goals. They say here, as CEO of the B team, she has been a dedicated participant at Goals House since its launch and is a passionate champion for the global goals. So she's now a head of state, but she's also representing the SDGs. She's also representing the Rothschild family and a whole lot of other interests alongside that. Interesting. Now, one organisation which also jumped in to pass on their congratulations was this one, the Reykjavik Global Forum. We've spoken about quite a few times recently. So this is an international community of female leaders, very heavily represented at Davos and elsewhere. And they say that their explicit goal is a world in which men and women are viewed as equally suitable to lead. Now, that goal has been under some threat over the past 12 months. And let's hear about that from this recent event, this recent panel discussion held at the Reykjavik Global Forum at the end of last year.
The long haul. How can we ensure women retain power? The challenge has long been, how can we elevate women into high positions of leadership? Increasingly, the challenge is not just to get there, to get elected, but to be re-elected. We've seen in 2023 numerous cases: Jacinda Ardern, Zuzana Chaputova, Sanna Marin, Nicola Sturgeon, Sigrid Kaag, all this year have chosen to step aside from high office, arguably at the peak of their powers, because of the stresses on themselves and their families. These are not isolated cases. Studies show disproportionate pressure on women is systemic. The Interparliamentary Union interviewed 81 female parliamentarians from 40 European countries. 85% of them experienced psychological violence, such as sexist remarks or intimidating behavior, while nearly half of them received threats of rape, beatings, or death. Now, I want to be sober about what we're dealing with here. The House, it's not on fire. To borrow from news of the day, the volcano is exploding.
Yeah, Ben, the first thing I would say about that is just to take two names. Jacinda Ardern, was she forced out of her position because of misogyny, or was she forced out of her position because she was behaving like an absolute fascist during the COVID time? And as for Nicola Sturgeon, was she forced out because of misogyny, or was she forced out because of corruption?
Well, those are very, very good questions and good examples, Mike, because the line that we're being fed here is that it was the awful, awful sexists who drove them out of office. But in reality, it was their own behavior, their own policies. And, when you dig into this, that's ultimately what this is all about, I think. There's a whole lot in there to unpack. The first one is the idea that the volcano is exploding. Yeah, there's so much drama being loaded into this. And just for the record, I will say that I will certainly never condone threats of violence. I don't think that anyone should be being threatened with rape or beatings or death or anything like that, right? 100% don't believe that that's correct behavior, shouldn't be going on. But then the idea that there is this thing called psychological violence is crazy to me. And the idea that sexist remarks, I mean, heaven forbid that we might be subjected to some sexist remarks on the internet as politicians. I mean, it's really laughable, the stuff that's being complained about here, right? And this idea that the pressure on women is disproportionate, frankly, I don't believe it. It might be that women are disproportionately incapable of dealing with that pressure, ultimately, which seems to be the issue here. So who was that doing the speaking? That was Rick Zednick. This fella here, he's actually running for the European Parliament. I'm just going to use the word obsequious to describe that little introduction that he gave here. And he did have three former heads of state on stage with him. So Tarja Halonen, so the former president of Finland, and she talked about the emergence of 24-hour social media and how that made it really difficult for Sanna Marin to be in office. She was the Prime Minister of Finland who left there last year and is now prostituting herself to the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. That's what Sanna Marin is up to now that she stepped out of political office. We also had on stage Dalia Grybauskaite, former president of Lithuania. I really like this woman, actually. She had a great energy about her. She described herself as the Iron Magnolia. She's like something out of a Bond film from the 80s. She's a black belt in martial arts. And very sensibly, she said, it's not about gender, it's about your personality. Yeah, and people like people who are willing to step up and take responsibility for the well-being of their country. Completely agree with you. And then the third head of state, or former head of state, was this lady, Simonetta Sommaruga. I hope I'm saying that correctly. She's former president of Switzerland. And she talked a lot about this word hate and the need for protections online, and the way that leaders are isolated by the mob, and that you have a wave of hate coming at you whenever you say anything, and that 95% of the hate comes from just 5% of the accounts online. And they really want to legislate against freedom of speech and people having their own opinions. This is really totalitarian stuff when you dig into it, but it's presented as being kind and empathetic. Now, there's a little clip here that I'm going to share from Simonetta Sommaruga, which I think gives an interesting insight into what's going on behind the scenes.
I wanted to attack the problem of women trafficking. So the reaction was, but there's no women trafficking in our country, in Switzerland. No. In all the other countries, but not in our country. And I thought, no, if we look at where there is women trafficking, if we want to see it, then we will find these women, and we have to work on that. And I worked together with the police, with the women protection organizations. I went to other countries, to Serbia, to Romania, together with the police over there, with the NGOs over there. And I think this is something I would say for all the women, because I was talking about the thin air. We have to work together. We have to surround us with those people who want to work together with us, and not have included everybody, but those who really want to achieve in our direction, we have to take them with us. And I think this is female leadership, and with that we can achieve quite a lot.
So two important points from that. The first one is that she's concerned with human trafficking. I think it's absolutely something she should be concerned about, and that all politicians and the whole of society, frankly, should be looking into. And a lot of what gets discussed at these events, and you should go and look at the longer talk, is that women are somehow solely interested. It's only them who are interested in human rights. It's only them that are interested in things like human trafficking. It's only them that are interested in the future of humanity, ultimately. And I think that that's a ridiculous statement, a ridiculous position to be taken. And then the second thing was what she said towards the end there, which is that women need to work together and find people who are amenable to their way of doing things, even if that ends up dividing the nation that you're leading, right? She very clearly said, we can't take everyone on this journey with us. The job of the leader is to unite the nation and to carry it forward. And what she's saying is that actually women aren't going to do that, they can't do that, and actually we need to take a different approach. And I think that's incredibly destructive, even in spite of the best intentions of trying to fight back against corruption and human trafficking and that kind of thing. So we basically provided with a list of all of the excuses and all the reasons why women leaders fail. And for me, that's really right at the root of the issue here, is that if you're a leader, you have to take responsibility. You can't blame it on those people over there or those people over there saying nasty things about you on the internet, right? You've got to take responsibility. And I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. The options for helping us out are there. We do need your support, and we can only do what we do with your help. You could share anything you find on the various platforms, but do remember that Facebook is apparently not available to us at the moment. And please do pick up anything that you like at the UK Column shop. Now, Debi, very briefly, your blog isn't up yet, but it will be this afternoon. What have you got for us this week?
Your prostates is one message, and yes, I did get a text. It wasn't from Love Island. I wasn't very amused. If you want to know more, have a look. And yeah, traffic lights, a new colour. Plenty more as well. Okay, thank you. And a reminder that we will be hosting an online event on the 16th of June, beginning at 10 a.m. That's a Sunday. UK Column Live. A whole bunch of UK Column presenters will be taking part in that. Do join us for it if you possibly can. And if you don't manage to make that, perhaps you can get along to the Sounds Beautiful Festival in Wimborne and Dorset on the 27th of June, 27th to the 30th of June. We will all be there. So join us there if you can. And Debi, we have a bit of news about the MHRA board meeting. Well, it's an Un-Ad. Have you ever heard of an Un-Ad before? Because luckily, I took a screenshot of when the next MHRA board meeting was going to be, and it was Dame June Rain's last board meeting, her swan song, where we were all going to wave her goodbye on Tuesday, the 9th of July, 2024. So we were looking forward to that. And thanks to Paul for letting me know, because he was trying to get tickets for it, as I was. And all of a sudden, it's gone. So is this the first Un-Advert that UK Column are putting out? But where has it gone? And please, could everybody write in and ask, where has the board meeting gone and why?
Yes, and maybe ask for it to be reinstated, because we want to offer Dame June the final opportunity to answer some questions. Okay, thank you, Debbie. Now, let's come on to Africa. And well, first of all, here is the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. He has been in Guinea, Congo, Burkina Faso and Chad over the last few days. The Deputy Defence Minister, Yakurov, has been visiting Libya, Mali and Niger. So they've been taking separate trips. So these are really the efforts to gain some traction in Africa against what's been going on, at least the influence of Western powers, including the UK and France and the United States. So these are the countries that they have been, or at least Russia has influence in already. So the ones in pink there, or sort of reddish color, are places where there's already some military deployment. The countries that are marked in yellow are places where there's already a defense agreement with Russia. But their main point here is that they are really aiming to strengthen economic engagement in these countries in various sectors, especially in nuclear energy. And they're aiming to mitigate the impact of pressure between these countries, Russia and the West. So they're attempting to, shall we say, develop new export markets for these places as well. And they, of course, also want to garner some new political allies in the region. And we've seen, for example, France, the French military and also the US military being expelled from a number of countries in the Sahel. And as we were talking about on Monday's program or Friday last week, I can't remember which, we were talking about the fact that the Sahel is sort of the main, viewed as the main stomping ground of the European Union. They consider that their southern neighbourhood. It's a place where Tony Blair and his institute is very interested in operating. So there is a definite effort to counter any Chinese or Russian influence in the region. And the fact that they are working so hard to develop these markets, particularly since the sanction regime was imposed, makes this a real hotbed for potential escalation in the future. In the meantime, many of those African countries taking part in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is going on at the moment. And we have a little bit of video of Vladimir Putin talking about, he was talking on the sidelines of the conference. His main speech is happening right at this moment, I believe, or it may just be over. But anyway, he was talking about the situation with NATO and the narrative of Russia wanting to take over Europe. Let's have a listen to this, or watch the subtitles at least.
Не надо формировать образ врага из России. Вы сами себе только вредите этим, понимаете? Вот напридумывали, что Россия хочет напасть на НАТО. Вы сбрендили совсем, что ли? Тупые вообще, как этот стол? Кто это придумал? Это чушь, понимаете? Бред собачий. Но это было бы бредом, да? Если бы не было задумкой для того, чтобы одурачивать свое собственное население. Говорить, караул, скоро Россия на нас нападет, и мы должны срочно вооружаться, срочно, направлять вооружение, на Украину. А на самом деле для чего это делать? Чтобы удержать свое собственное имперское положение и величие. Вот для чего это делается. Вот для чего эти угрозы и пугалки для бюргеров в Германии, во Франции и в других частях Европы. Вот для чего. Такой угрозы не существует и быть не может. Мы сами себя защищаем на Украине.
Now, I'm going to say I find it very hard to argue with that, particularly with the escalation in Ukraine. Now, we were talking about the fact that Ukraine has now been given the go-ahead to attack targets inside Russia. Using Western weapons. And somebody had commented to me that, of course, this has been going on for quite some time. Well, that's true, but it's the targets that have been selected more recently that are of concern here, particularly. So this is a Responsible Statecraft website here. Droning Russia's nuke radars is the dumbest thing Ukraine could do. And this is the point. The latest targets have been Russia's nuclear early warning systems. And of course, this is a direct attack on Russia's nuclear infrastructure, and that escalates things somewhat. So, Putin has been absolutely clear now that this is absolutely unacceptable. So he's basically saying that if Russia is attacked, it has the legal right to retaliate. Such actions could lead to a major disaster, effectively World War III. And I think that's absolutely right. And the danger in what we are doing at this point in the West is off the charts. And the other point to make was, just listening to Joe Biden at the D-Day commemoration yesterday was quite incredible, as he used that as an opportunity to suggest or draw parallels between what's happening with Ukraine and what happened during the Second World War. And just to end this segment, I just want to bring this on screen because this is the Telegraph. And we just always got to watch the headlines and see the types of language that they're using. So the headline on this article from today, actually, or yesterday, was Russian warships sent to Caribbean for surprise war games. So when the Russians are doing it, it's war games because it's all about war. When we're doing it, it's a training exercise. And you've got to be, so the headline from this one is pictured HMS Prince of Wales full steam ahead in NATO training exercise. This is Steadfast Defender that we talked about earlier in the year, because this is the biggest NATO exercise that's taken place ever. So I just thought it was interesting to contrast the language that's used in those two cases, because Russia's all about war and we're all about peace, aren't we? Debi, let's come back onto the issue of antimicrobial resistance.
Yes, let's. And apologies again that I'm sitting in the dark. But people ask me a lot, what is coming next? What do I think is coming next? Is it avian flu? Is it this? Is it that? Is it whatever it is? Antimicrobial resistance, according to the WHO, is one of the top global emerging threats. Fact. Now, this is a really big subject, and it's a subject that I'm going to be doing a one-off special with Cheryl Granger, especially on antimicrobial resistance. But I think that it could be a dark winter ahead. What have they got planned for us? Well, I'll just say #walking pneumonia. Keep an eye out for walking pneumonia. There's going to be more to come, but is this an attack on the gut biome? Now, I've got a lot to get through, so it's going to be slides fairly quickly, so bear with me because this is just an overview of a huge, huge subject. So let's start off with Antibiotic Guardian. And now you're going to have to get well soon without antibiotics. Now, just note that without antibiotics. So where are we going to go from there? Well, according to King's, today we're living in an age where antimicrobials could, on average, put 20 years on your life if we save antibiotics. Now, this paper came out in 2017, but it's a big agenda for Tedros and the WHO. Let's listen to what Tedros says about antimicrobial resistance.
Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, threatens to send us back to a time whenever minor infections were untreatable. Already, AMR contributes to nearly 5 million deaths every year. These drug-resistant infections are driven by the misuse and overuse of antimicrobials in both humans and animals. World AMR Awareness Week is an opportunity to draw attention to what all of us can do. This means clean water, sanitation and hygiene, and infection prevention and control in health facilities. It means vaccines for children, older people, and others most at risk. It means responsible use of antimicrobials in all sectors, and it means a One Health approach that recognizes the links between the health of humans, animals, and our environment. Stopping AMR is a shared responsibility.
Take note, it's a shared responsibility. So in September, this September 2024, is a United Nations General Assembly high-level meeting on AMR. Now, this is going to be a massive meeting, and it's going to coincide with a lot of social messaging that you're going to hear. When you go further into that document, you can see the roadmap. So this all started in 2014, and here we are in 2024, waiting for the UN General Assembly meeting. But they clearly have called it now a political declaration, a major milestone for increased political action. So antimicrobial resistance has become a political football. And one more slide on from that, you can see that we've got the private-public partnership also mentioned there. And at the bottom, you'll see that the UK launches world's first substitute for antibiotic supply. And of course, what have we got in the UK? But we've got the Fleming Centre, and we featured the Fleming Centre last week. This is at St Mary's Hospital, Paddington, and this is going to be a centre designed for the next 5 years to fight antimicrobial resistance. Now, this is also a Labour Party campaign. This is a big political football. So here you can see on Labour list, antimicrobial resistance, the biggest health challenge of our time. So again, a political football. I want you to look at the government's documents, though, because they've got a vision, and their vision is not impressive. This document was published in 2019. And what it says is that 1 in 3 patients in hospitals in England are on an antibiotic at any one time. And 1 in 3 individuals in England takes at least one course of antibiotics every year. The report also goes on to talk about a collaborative future. Now, this collaborative future is with the same old names that we're used to. The research community, the United Nations, the European Union, G7, G20. We're looking at industry, private sector. But take note, we're looking at the patients, the public, and in particular, we're looking at animal owners. So just take note. But what have we got to do? We've got to be ready, willing, and engaged, because this is going to be up to us. Everybody, we have got to do our duty. We have got to virtue signal to say that we won't use antibiotics if we don't need to, or when we don't need to. So the Global AMR Innovation Fund, otherwise known as GAMRIF, is to support early stage innovative research in underfunded areas of antimicrobial resistance. Now, this again is a private-public partnership working with research organizations, governments, and industry. And it's also targeting the One Health approach. But who runs this? So there are two people that I want to highlight to run this in particular. There's lots of them, but we're just for time going to keep it to 2. Christopher Edgerton Warburton is the chair of the expert advisory group and will represent GAMRIF internationally. And we've got Professor Keith Klugman there from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So let's have a quick look at those 2 people. And there you can see Christopher Edgerton Warburton of Lion's Head. And if you look a bit further, you can see that he spent 14 years at Goldman Sachs. So follow the money. And then very quickly on to Keith Klugman, Professor Keith Klugman at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, interestingly, he specialises in pneumonia, as does Professor Graham Cook, chair of the MHRA board. They are looking specifically at pneumonia, so walking pneumonia and pneumonia for winter 2024, I think we should be looking at. But let's not forget, the UK has our very own Special Envoy for Antimicrobial Resistance, Dame Sally Davis. We have shown this before, but let's just remind ourselves of a quick piece of video from her very good self.
We all know that without diagnostics, current and new antibiotics will be incorrectly prescribed and overused. That'll speed up the development of resistance and puts us all at increased risk.
Note the word there, diagnostics, because this is all about diagnostics. This is about putting sticks up your nose and testing you for things. But recently, the government brought out this paper, and this is a very, very important paper. Please, can I get everybody to go and have a look at this? Confronting Antimicrobial Resistance 2024 to 2029. Let's go and look at a little bit further in, because you'll see that what they've done is they've taken the lessons from COVID and they're rolling them out now for antimicrobial resistance. So engagement with industry, regulatory pathways, we'll come on to that in a minute, and innovations in vaccine technology, just to name but a few. And of course, we've got to be a good global partner. The UK has got to play its part in this. So we have to achieve the vision, and it's the public in the UK that have to become the good global partners. Going further on in the document, I just want you to take special notice of this. Several initiatives across the UK are in place to ensure that citizens know that water from their taps is safe to drink and that their sewage waste is being properly managed and treated. This includes regulation of water companies and monitoring of waterways. And so regulators and water companies will play a vital role in this area. Now, we'll come on to a bit more about that in a minute, but also in the document, it refers to Porton Down. And what it says about Porton Down is that it has a 4-bedded ward and isolation rooms with dedicated heating, ventilation, air conditioning, realistic water and drainage systems. What to look at? To look at antibiotic resistance, infections, and they're going to be looking through a number of transmission routes, fomites, aerosols, pathogen, but also hospital water systems. I want you to take special note of hospital water systems. Could this be going forward what we're going to be looking at? It also mentions hospital laundry there too. And I have to say, I've been barking on about nurses' uniforms for a very long time. But, you know, it affects the kids too, because we have to target the young, right? So courtesy of the UK HSA, here's eBug. And now we're going to be teaching 3-year-olds, 3 to 16-year-olds, all about vaccines, all about antimicrobial resistance, and all about hygiene. And there is a lovely little video to go with that. Maybe we can look at it at another week in the news, but they're definitely targeting the youngsters. And also in the paper is PACE. This is a £30 million programme over 5 years. There's your 5 years again. Life Arc, Innovate, Medicines Discovery, Catapult. I'm sure Hedley Reese will be very pleased to hear the word catapult. And this is going to strengthen the pipeline, so you're going to get some nice new antimicrobial drugs coming down the pipeline. But of course, the MHRA are involved, and the paper does mention the MHRA and says that they're going to be responsible for regulation of all of these new drugs because it's very, very important. So let's go on to see the new group that the MHRA have appointed. And here they've got 1.8 million, courtesy of the Department of Health and Social Care, especially to look at how to fast track all these drugs coming down the pipeline. So let's go to the MHRA blog. I did tell you there was a lot, and I'm trying to get through it as quickly as I can. So the MHRA are deeming antimicrobial resistance as a looming global health emergency. They also say that the unexpected potential solution to AMR could come in the form of a bacterial vaccine. Well, that's surprising, isn't it? So we're going to be treating antimicrobial resistance with vaccines, and we're going to be using novel needle-free delivery of vaccine candidates for things like Group A and B strep. Also, you'll be pleased to know that the MHRA are involved in a transatlantic task force on antimicrobial resistance, and they want to identify solutions to the problem that hasn't yet happened as soon as possible. And we are going to be finishing up, I promise you, but I just want to put out a warning because it seems to be that they're targeting pregnant mums, saying to pregnant mums, if you use antibiotics in pregnancy, this could affect your unborn baby. And here they're using seborrheic dermatitis as an example. So what have we got coming down the pipeline? Well, Oxford suggests we've got a novel triple drug combination effective against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And I've just put the academic paper for anybody that's interested to go and have a look at it. The triple combination of meropenem, avibactam, and metallolactamase. None of it sounds good at all, but please go and look at that. Also, we've got mRNA vaccine platforms. Are they going to be the next solution? Well, yes, it looks as though they are. And one on from that on the conclusion, it says that mRNA vaccine platform could be a promising solution to the challenges currently encountered in AMR vaccine development, although the jury is still out. I'm sure the jury won't be out for long. Antibiotic Research UK, they're talking also about could mRNA vaccines protect us from antibiotic-resistant infections. So what have we got to do? Well, we've all got to become antibiotic guardians. This was started in 2014, but they're going to ramp it up. And just note the names there: British Society for Antimicrobial Chemotherapy. Don't we all associate chemotherapy with cancer? However, now it's associated with antimicrobial resistance. And what are you going to do? Well, you're going to make a pledge. You have to make a pledge to the United Kingdom government, to the United Kingdom HSA, that you're going to be very good and you'll make better use of antibiotics and you'll help save antibiotics from becoming obsolete. And if you really want to go the full mile, you can buy your very own antimicrobial lapel pin to show that you're virtue signaling. So that was a quick run around, but there's so much more to come.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a bit more about this in extra, Debbie, but I wanted to just get your comment on the main news about this comment about not using antibiotics when we don't need to. I don't believe there's anybody that attempts to use antibiotics when they don't need to. They're either fed them by their doctors. That's basically the reason. And bearing in mind the damage that antibiotics do to the gut microbiome, this isn't something that people do as a matter of choice. They're not trying to buy them off the shelves like sweeties. They are handed them by the doctor for presumably medical reasons.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is an assault on our gut biome at the end of the day. And who says we're resistant to antibiotics? Are antibiotics being manufactured a little bit less powerful so that they don't work in order for us to think that they don't work? There's a much bigger agenda here, Mike, and perhaps we'll talk about, because behavior is involved in this big time as well, nudging. So maybe we'll talk about it a bit more in extra.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ben, let's come on to you. And what's Imperial College been up to?
That's a very good question. Yes, you brought them up earlier with Neil Ferguson's involvement in the COVID scenario, and they're running a big event this week called Leading Systemic Innovation in Healthcare. Let's hear a bit more about it.
This is a really exciting time in healthcare. We stand at the dawn of the greatest changes in science, medicine, and technology. But on the other hand, we have growing levels of ill health and sickness. So our challenge is, how do we reconcile these two worlds? So this is the innovation challenge in front of us. Imperial is an ideal place to explore these innovation challenges in healthcare. It has a great history of innovation. It has a business school, but it also has a medical school and links to hospitals. So it's embedded into this healthcare system and has, therefore, a 360-degree view of these kind of challenges. We will be covering themes such as the future of healthcare. So we were looking at these major trends and how they like to play out that shapes the landscape we're in. We'll be investigating more deeply innovation as we currently see it through products and services, but also extending that to systems innovation. How do we innovate our organizations and the ecosystems? This is an important piece that's often missing from thinking. We'll then dive deeper into looking at some of these frontiers of what's happening in genomics, personalized medicine, as well as AI and behavior change and other dimensions that form the suite of capabilities required to be successful in healthcare. And then we'll finish off with looking at how do we bring these innovations alive within our organization at a faster pace than we're currently used to. And how do we think about our organizations as cultural platforms for innovation? What does this mean for leadership? What does it mean for the culture of change within our organization? So there'll be some practical tools and insights that people can take away and bring benefit to their organization. This program provides an ideal opportunity to bring people from across the healthcare spectrum together into the same room. So this program is going to give people an opportunity to meet peers across the healthcare spectrum, together exploring this shared innovation challenge of how we improve the quality and impact of healthcare writ large.
So that is an event that is happening this week. It's happening right now, Leading Systemic Innovation in Healthcare. It's an executive education program at Imperial, heavily backed by the Gates Foundation, the source of a lot of the misinformation which led to the lockdowns and everything that we had to live through. back in 2020 and subsequently. The guy speaking was Andy Wilkins. He describes himself as a futurist, always slightly suspicious of people who call themselves futurists, to be honest with you. And he's very excited about AI, genomics, and behavior change, which is the full suite of capabilities for healthcare systems leadership, right? This is their little box of tricks that they've got to get you to do things that you want, that they want you to do and to experiment on you. I was really quite taken with the image at the top there, because what that is a view inside the Digital Control Centre. You can see that it's the Imperial College London Sentinel programme, delivered in partnership with the Defence Science and Technology Lab at Porton Down. Right, so this is a joint partnership between them, and this is essentially the systems leader view of all of the fake data coming from the dodgy PCR tests that are going to flash up on screen so they can play whack-a-mole across the country. They've got the US up on the screen there, but the same thing, absolutely the same capability is in place and applies in the UK. There's another view of it here you can see, which was in the video shared. And basically this is where they call the big shots centrally across the whole of the population. I think that gives you a really interesting insight into how the whole system operates in the background and how these big decisions got made. Now, talking about dodgy data, I'm going to flip from pandemic data and health data into the climate debate. And you would have noticed over the past few weeks that people like the Met Office have been trying to convince us that it's been the hottest May on record, that we've been breaking all sorts of barriers in terms of the heat that we've experienced in the country. But anyone who actually lives in the country, has been in the country the entire time, knows that that's complete nonsense. We've even seen snow in Scotland over the past few weeks, right? This just doesn't make sense. And you hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, they're really getting desperate now. You know, they're going to try and pull one over on us, but we're not going to go along with it. But I think what it's important for people to understand and to remember is that this isn't actually directed at you. This is directed at young people, right? So the people that have been completely immersed in this whole narrative through their education and don't have the context. They weren't alive in, you know, the 90s or even earlier than that, for example. So they don't know. Right, so they very much go along with what they've been told. They've been G'd up into this climate anxiety, right? Especially younger women, right? And this certainly feeds into what I was talking about earlier in terms of female leadership. And what you have is people like Greta Thunberg or people like Clover Hogan, who you can see here in this Guardian article, who's becoming much more prominent, essentially terrorizing young people to get them to go along with whatever recommendations are made. In this instance, as it relates to the energy system, it will be Great British Energy, right? This new nationalised energy system that the Labour Party are going to try and push through. They're going to push it through not just on a climate issue, but also on a national security issue. So he's talking about closing the door on Putin. This is Keir Starmer. But obviously, we know that it's not just about Russia. The Lammy has been playing kiss up to Zelensky. This is just yesterday from the D-Day celebrations. So you can see that the Labour leadership are very much on the narrative as it relates to Ukraine. And actually, the World Economic Forum has just announced this week, this is actually last week, this is a huge, huge development. They've just announced a new global government technology centre in Kyiv, which is going to focus on public-private partnerships, digital transformation, and delivering the fourth industrial revolution. That's what they're absolutely focused on, and that's what this propaganda push is going to carry us into if we don't pay closer attention to it. And then just a final one to wrap up here. We've also seen this week the Sustainable Markets Initiative, Terra Carta. They had their big meeting over in New York. The S30 group of chief sustainability officers, attended by Arlo Brady, representing Freud Group, Gold's House, hosted by Estee Lauder, which is connected to the Rothschild family, EY, who I've talked about at length previously. And this is how, again, the narrative is being played through by Team Global.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now let's leave it with this article. This is The Guardian, and it's George Monbiot, the wonderful George Monbiot. We all love him to bits, particularly when he's attacking people in his local area on The Guardian, totally without justification. But anyway, I hope everybody appreciates the sarcasm in that. General elections are a travesty of democracy, he says. Let's give the people a real voice. So let's have a look and see what he's saying here. An election is a device for maximizing conflict and minimizing democracy. Parties gain ground by sowing division and anger, often around trivial issues that play to their advantage. Communities are set against each other. See how the Tories appeal to their elderly base by treating young people as a problem to be solved currently through national service. He doesn't say anything about how all politicians are treating elderly people as a problem at the moment that need to be dealt with through euthanasia. But anyway, let's not worry about that. He goes on to say, in David Van Raybroek's excellent book, Against Elections, he favours sortition. And he defines sortition as choosing members of political bodies by lottery. This is how much of political life was run in ancient Athens and in Venice, Florence, and other European cities in the second millennium. Now, we'll just talk about Venice in a second, but remember that Florence was the home of the Florentine banking oligarchy, or the Lombard banking system. And of course, that migrated through the Netherlands into the city of London, which is why the streets in London are called Lombard Street, and banks tend to have the word Lombard in them around the place. So when we're looking at whether Florence or Venice should be held up as being the bastion of the best way to be governed, well, get an idea of what Venice was like from this book, The Bravo, by James Fenimore Cooper. If you haven't read it, read it, because what do we need to understand about Venice? First of all, it was an oligarchy. So the Doge was at the top, and it was absolutely an oligarchy. Political assassination was commonplace, and the favourite weapon was the stiletto. And, well, maybe there's an argument for bringing all this back. I don't know, maybe that's what Monbiot's calling for. I'm not sure that that's terribly clear. But, Ben, the issue of sortition, people still don't quite grasp why this is important.
Yes, well, I mean, they're going to completely transform. The plan is to completely transform the way that decisions are made in the country. And it's not just Monbiot saying it. This is Labour Party policy, more or less. Sue Gray, who's effectively operating Keir Starmer, has been a big proponent of it. And the thing that jumps out at me is just this idea that we're going to select people by lottery. I don't want decision makers selected by lottery. I want the best people in the room making the decision, not necessarily even on my behalf, right? It's removing our voice, and it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, but on the other hand, people would argue that what we've got at the moment is that's the argument he is making, that what we've got is a disaster. But what he's suggesting is we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Most people are forgetting that what the proposal for sortition allows for an even worse situation, and that's the point that we've got to discuss further. Maybe we'll do that in extra as well. But look, I just want to end today with a couple of sort of and finally slides here. First of all, this Mail article, which is quite staggering. New Bridget Jones film being shot on the site of school, falsely accused of running a satanic paedophile ring. So this is the school at the centre of the allegations of satanic abuse and child abuse in Hampstead. So this is what they say. But it's unclear, the Mail says, whether producers were aware of the school's past before setting fictional North London school, setting the fictional North London school on its grounds. Christchurch Primary was recently the subject of a Channel 4 documentary accused the Hampstead paedophile hoax, which shook up the quiet suburban neighbourhood in 2014. Not just Channel 4 pseudo-documentary, but also a big supposed expose by Tortoise Media as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in extra, but I'll leave you with this. Because if you remember, a few months ago, we mentioned the fact that the UK's early warning radar system, which of course points towards Russia, was being subverted by our own net zero policy, because of course we've been building wind farms offshore off the east coast of England. And that's the direction the radar points in. And these things scatter the radar waves. So unfortunately, the radar wasn't working terribly well. You'll be glad to know that the UK, this is Defence Eye, saying the UK pays to mitigate wind farm radar effects. You'll be glad to know that we have set aside £1 billion of Great British pounds in order to mitigate the effect of our own net zero policy on our early warning radar system, which is supposed to tell us when Putin is firing his nuclear missiles at us. I find it incredible that we are wasting this money in this way, but we can talk about that and extra perhaps as well. So we got to leave it there for today. So I'm going to say thank you very much to everybody that joined us. Thanks to Ben and Debbie. We'll see you in a few minutes if you're a UK Column member on Extra. Otherwise, have a great weekend and we'll see you Monday as usual, 1 p.m. Bye-bye.